Welcome to our annual fireside chat with myself, Anthony Nicholls, Corporate Vice President of OpenEye Cadence Molecular Sciences, and Paul Hawkins, erstwhile evangelist for OpenEye through the years and a good friend. And we're here to have our annual fireside chat. Not that we've ever had one before, but that doesn't stop us. We thought it would be a great thing to do, to have him share some questions, which I hope might be questions that you yourself might have wanted to ask of OpenEye, of me, and me to provide some answers, which hopefully are intelligible. So we're here in my nice home with my nice furniture, my nice whiskey, which Paul has promised not to spill on the nice furniture. So if you can manage to do that and answer questions at the same time, that would be great.
Ask questions, keep your hands to yourself.
Yes, indeed.
That's lovely. Thanks for having us. Let's get going. OpenEye joined Cadence last year. How have things been going?
It's our first full year. Amazing it's gone by so quickly. I'm happy to say I think it's been a very successful year, both in terms of OpenEye, if it was considered on its own, but also as a part of the larger body of which we find ourselves now, Cadence Design Systems. They've been, I think, very supportive of us. They're very excited about our mission. We've hired over 40 people. So I think, again, one of the reasons that the merger happened was that we felt we were at that stage where we really needed to grow rapidly because of all the opportunities we have to deliver things to customers. So those 40 are distributed in science and in sales and in support. I think our support group now is just probably the best, I think, in the industry, I would claim. And still hiring. Right? We're still looking for good people, especially people with industry experience who want to be a part of this journey that we now find ourselves on in the next, what I think of as the next phase. We had 25 years to get to the point where we were actually ready to either take investment or be acquired. And the idea really was to see what we could do next.
So where do you see OpenEye's major contributions to the biggest problems our customers face?
A lot of answers to that, right? Because I think we have the science and the technology, but I also feel like this whole issue about hype, right? And are things real? Are things really valuable? And I think AI has some of both, right? I think our industry has always been largely based on hype and hope. We have sick people, right, who we want to treat. And if you're sick, the only thing you can do is hope you get better. And so that infuses our industry, right? We're very hopeful. And sometimes hope then leads you to be less resistant to hype, right? Because you'll grab at anything because we want to make a difference, right? Our approach, our tools, our insistence on good statistics is something that we'll continue to give to our customers, and in particular, like the simple methods to compare to, right? So I don't want to just peddle the big AI solutions. I want to say, here's the simple things you should always be trying, right, to compare everything to. So I think providing some immunity to hype while keeping the hope.
And something I think we'd modestly say you're well known for in the industry is being a little bit of a gadfly about validation and statistics and so on. Are we going to continue to sting the industry to be better at that?
I'm glad you brought that up because I do feel like that was one of my midlife crises, right? When I suddenly realized I didn't understand statistics.
So rather than buy a Porsche, you thought you'd learn the t-test.
Yeah. So it was sort of like around 2007, and I had sabbatical in 2008 where I was like, got to get serious about the statistics stuff. And I came back really looking at the field and knew that we weren't really assessing whether one thing was better than another. There's more hope, right? This seems like it should be better, right? And even with our own work, is 3D actually better than 2D? In what sense is it better? Right? Because a lot of metrics you try, they look the same. You have to look in detail and look at things like surprisal. Right? Are you surprised at the result? And 2D often gives you results, but they're not necessarily surprising. Whereas 3D can break you out of that. So I think those concepts of statistical validity and how to actually evaluate methods is something I got very into. And I ran the Gordon Conference in 2013, which was in many ways the pinnacle of my pseudo-academic career. But I don't think that revolution is I think it's far from over. I think there's a lot more still can be done about how do we take data and really learn from it.
Very good. Well, speaking of data and learning from it, obviously everyone in the industry and around the world's kind of in a bit of a tizzy about artificial intelligence.
Oh, I thought you'd never been there.
I thought I'd never asked. So perhaps you could tell us a little bit about what you see OpenEye's approach to artificial intelligence is and where you think it's going to be.
Well, I think it's nice to think that previous answer, right? That AI is the thing now everyone's excited about, but isn't that there haven't been other things during the course of the last 25 years. And I think the OpenEye approach, our culture, if you will, towards hype, is to be interested and skeptical, right? So there's always something there which is worth learning, but we've never been a company which says, like, drop everything. This is clearly the way to do things, right? And so we all lived through combinatorial chemistry, for example, right? I mean, it was, we don't have to make molecules. We just, here in my glass, which is, just tea, was like billions of compounds. And of course, they were all bad compounds, so it didn't go anywhere. So we've lived through the share of hype. But I don't think AI is hype. There's a lot of good mathematical approaches embedded in those methods, which I think can be applied in situ in the way that we do things. So I do think AI, everything we've seen, is very exciting and will play a major role in how we move forward. But I don't see it as like just obliterating everything that's gone before it, right? And there's a certain sense of like just have AI do everything. I'm like, why, right? And it's not necessarily better. And you should be testing whether it's better, not just assuming because it can make fanciful pictures like at demand or it can like seemingly converse with you. That doesn't mean it can make drugs. Right? That's the leap. And the field has been made those mistakes for many years, that things which seem like a if this then that don't necessarily follow. So I think we have to be excited but cautious. We have integrated a number of AI things already into what we do. And one, if we have time to talk about my pet project, Carnot, named after the French mathematician and engineer from the early 1800s. It really has an AI arch to it, and almost an orchestration of how we do things. So we're definitely very much using AI both in situ and in our planning.
So tell us a little bit about the OpenEye approach to AI. You were hoping I was going to ask that.
Yeah. No, we are part now of a broader company, right, which actually is seen as one of the leading AI companies in the world, largely because of the successful application of these techniques to chip design. Right? They have a phenomenal product in Cerebrus. Not that anyone in our field will know it, but it's making real inroads and making real impact. So we really are a part of that movement to apply AI in the workplace and to make things more efficient. So OpenEye is very committed to finding where AI is appropriate, where it will have impact, but also to blend it with the other things we do, whether the simple, straightforward things which we think can be enhanced, or whether it's the physics-based methods which can both be enhanced and also enhance the AI methods. So AI is clearly very central to Cadence and very central to OpenEye, and our CEO is very keen on saying, like, there is a layer cake of things that we do. Right? We have at the bottom a technology. Right, it's the cloud in our case, or in their case, it's the knowledge of circuitry. And then you have the simulation of software levels, like how well is that working? Right? How well is the chips working? How well are our drugs working? How well is our protein level? And then you have the third layer is the AI. Right? How do you orchestrate that? How do you extract knowledge from that which you can apply at speed or at scale? And so I think that kind of three-level approach is very much that one that we are inculcating in what we do.
So there's a really good complementarity, some synergy between the two.
Complementarity. Yeah. And again, I think you can't be. My concern is that people fall into camps, right? They fall into the physics camp or the AI camp, whereas like there is no camp, right? There is just science, right? And I think what's interesting to me, if you go to the hard physics, right, you get into like CERN and particle detection, all using machine learning, right? What are they using it for? They're using it to get massive amounts of data from the accelerators, and they need to pass through them and recognize trajectories, recognize differences in momentum. That's what they can train it to do. And so that's kind of revolutionizing hard physics in that sense.
So AI is a mechanism for data handling and data science.
Everyone's looking for LLMs to, like, again, change the world, right? And they will, but will they change our world? And in what way will they change our world? Because, again, the assumption with every new technology, every change, probably for the history of mankind, is that we'll solve everything. But as we know, that isn't the way it works out. So what are LLMs specifically going to do? And again, the interesting thing being part of a company like Cadence, you get access to a lot of people who are like very instrumental in this happening, right? I was very privileged to have a conversation with Jensen Huang, right, the founder and CEO of NVIDIA, and was really powering this. And so he said, and I think I quote, said, there are two things which matter, right? Accelerated computing and LLMs. That's what's going to change the world. So, and it's very charismatic. It's very hard not to be like, well, that's it, solved then. That's all we need.
Okay.
Right? But if you really look at LLM, and again, talking to other people that I've had the privilege to in the EDA world, it's that it's the ability to parse data and put it in a form which can then be used is really what LLMs are superb at. And if you go back to like the original paper on data science, or defining the term data science, which was, Tukey, right, the great statistician and polymath Tukey, he said that 95% of the work is just data preparation. So it's like, anyone can run models with the appropriate level of statistics, like sprinkled on top, right? But you have to get the data in some form. And that, I think, has been data science in its rawest. And now you're seeing something which, I don't think any of us would have predicted a couple of years ago, can do that faster, more accurately, and at a larger scale than we ever imagined. So I see it will revolutionize data science in a way much more than it will science per se, right? Because I think it will sort out in some sense, the hard work, the grunt work that's needed to provide a consistent set of data that we can learn from. Right? And I do feel like humans can do that well, but we move on, we grow old, we join other companies. A lot of our customers have data sets which they no longer know the provenance of. I've heard that over and over again. But if you can begin to get machine learning to help with that in any way, that's kind of huge. So I see LLMs in our field very much on the data curation and I've been saying if we could get LLMs to read every paper which comes out and give us intelligible summaries and fit it into the Parthenon of good and bad science, well, what a world. What a world. But we're not asking them to do science, we're asking them to interpret the data in a way which is meaningful and useful. And we'll take it from there.
To relieve the human being of the, you said, the grunt task, to concentrate on the things that only we can do.
Which is very common in the ADA now, and Jensen was using often as co-pilot. Right? There are co-pilots.
So lots of positives. Do you see negatives that the field will have to deal with?
I used to say our industry is hype and hope, right? And the two very, very closely entwined because we're trying to solve diseases. Right? And if you are sick, your biggest hope is you get well. So that permeates our industry, is that there's immense hope. And so that leaves us somewhat open to hype. I personally like to see people waste their time with things which basically don't work or can be done faster and quicker. So that is my worry, especially since the publicity around AI tends to affect the minds of people in C-suites, right? Because that's what they're paid for. They're paid for seeing what the big picture things are. And there's no doubt there's no bigger picture than AI at the moment. So my concern about the dangers of AI is that it actually, in some cases, may not even be as effective, and yet people feel they have to do it because they have to have their AI solution. And I think a more balanced approach is more valuable, but my fear is that the industry at the moment is still in the thrall. Right?
The pendulum's still swinging.
It's still in motion. There's no doubt about that, yeah.
So I want to turn away from AI for a minute to talk about probably a slightly better established approach to predicting molecular property, and that's physics.
Yes.
So, we've always placed a strong... Physics, you remember that?
Yes. Back in the day.
So I think we've always placed a strong emphasis on physics for calculating relevant properties here, going back to, as you were saying, the foundational pieces like ZAP, rocks for shape, and so on. So where do you see physics having contributions to AI in 2024?
Well, I mean, again, you mentioned shape and so forth. I, in the early days, used to kind of do battle with my colleagues who were more of the MD flavor and variety, that they're not the only physics game in town. Because for me, physics, I am a physicist, that was my background. I see physics as a way of doing things, right? Which is you try to look for the models which are the simplest, which are yet effective, right? And physics is very good at that. And I feel what we did with shape and electrostatics was one of those key moments in the field that we showed people this is doable computationally, robustly, but also very effective. So I think we've been doing physics from that point of view, as you say, for a long, long time. But the question is what can we do more, right? And so, and then I do admit that MD, and we are heavily invested in molecular dynamics, has begun to show its true worth, right? And so whether it's affinity predictions or conformational change or permeability, I mean, all things that we have found internally and are now beginning to roll out to customers to be actually predictive. So I find that really exciting, because I used to draw this graph where the x-axis was how much effort you're putting in, and the y-axis was how accurate your results were. And I used to say, in an engineering discipline, it's well known, if it's chip design or whatever, you put more effort in, accuracy goes up. And yet, in our field, certainly for a long time, you're putting more and more effort, going beyond MD to quantum, whatever, and things will actually get worse, which is not what you'd want. So, but I always thought in the back of my mind, the day that slope tips up, and you have an advantage to put more effort in, then it's a game changer. Because the sums of money involved in making drugs are so large, why would you not put in absurd sums to get a better result, right? And I think we're on that side of things now. So I think MD and physics-based methods in general, if we have time to talk about how those work together with AI, are really like game changers now. But they do require, again, it sounds like a broken record, computation, right? It's like this is a computational world now. So I feel like we are very invested in those. We always have been. We have a large team in molecular dynamics now, affinity group, conformational change group, physical properties such as permeability. They really are permeating, no pun intended, almost everything we do. So I am very proud of that, because I did feel like, as a physicist, you want to come in and make a difference. And many physicists don't, because they trivialize the problems. But I always felt like the physicists come in and try to learn what the problems really are, can make an impact. And I think that's largely the story of OpenEye.
And would you sort of draw the analogy between MD and AI, that I think admittedly you were something of an MD skeptic, and interested but skeptical? Yeah,
well, my MD friends always thought I was just anti-MD, but I was anti unscientific presentations, right? And I saw a lot of presentations which were purely retrospective, but somehow that would get lost in the mix. Like, we predicted this. No, you knew that was going to happen. And then you saw MD also could do the same thing, not the same thing. So I felt I was, again, a certain amount of hype that there was hope, right, that this was actually working. And I didn't want us to rush off as a field and madly just run MD unless we were positive it was actually making a contribution. But I think partly, two things have happened. We have got better at force fields, but also our ability to actually simulate for longer and sample has made enormous differences. And again, much as the AI community has benefited from GPUs, the MD community would be nowhere where it is. We're not able to calculate 10 or 100 times faster. So I think sometimes technologies, again, it's the hardware which makes the theory actually work. Whereas before, people like to pretend it worked because it seemed like it should work. And I feel we're too important a business to be doing things because we think they work. We should know they work.
So given that physics and AI are both of obvious interest in one way, property calculation, another way sort of molecular recognition, recognizing a molecule that's interesting, how do you see the two of them complementing one another?
But the AI and the physics space? Yeah, that is they used to say the $64,000 question, right? We know we can calculate things, and physics is a great way of, if you don't know what the answer is going to be, like you've never seen it before, like physics is general enough to be able to do anything, right? And that's its secret, it's a superpower. Whereas AI, its superpower is recognition. I mean, starting from very early, like breakthroughs by Hinton, like using dropout in neural nets and so forth to just recognize speech, right, and recognize sounds, and moving on to images. That massive change that suddenly ImageNet, the competitions, it was all over. Everyone was using neural nets. So I feel like that is where the difference lies. Is that if we're in a domain where we know the domain, and we can populate the domain with examples. AI is proven amazingly effective at recognition. But if you really want to make something new, where you don't know what the domain really holds, then you have no choice but to do physics. But physics can take longer, right? And AI can also move faster. So I think what's great about where we are now is we have these two wonderful approaches which are very complementary. Immensely complementary, and not just complementary in like, is it Leonard or is it Lennon or is it McCartney, but what can they do together? And so I feel a lot of the really exciting things are where AI is helping physics and physics is helping AI. So I don't think it's like you have the AI department working on things and your physics department working. Never the twain shall meet. It's actually meeting in the tea room, right, and actually hashing it out. That's where the excitement is.
So can you give some specific examples where you maybe see that physics is going to help AI become more effective? Things like featurization.
I think featurization is the obvious one. I mean, I think that's the two things that you need for AI is you need quality data. Well, typically, not always, a lot of it, but the right features to represent things. And so what's happened, and this is another thing where again you ask like what my concerns are. It's like the AI community, the second they saw smile strings. God bless Dave Weininger, went crazy. They're like, oh, it's just a string. Well, we know how to do with strings. So again, this black box approach of just like take something from one field, like language passing and so forth, and just apply it to another because obviously it will work, troubles me. This is the whole point of OpenEye. Molecules are not strings, not graphs. They're three-dimensional entities which interact by bumping into things, shape, or attracting things from long distances, electrostatics. And so unless we have a representation which captures that, you're leaving so much on the table that maybe it's actually worse, right? Maybe you think it's great because it's AI, but it isn't. So I'm not a big fan of just applying these techniques naively because it just fits, right? And my theory of how you should do things as scientists is break them down, right? Take them apart, find the bits which are cool, and think how you can apply them within your domain. I mean, you and I are both fans of great statistics and statisticians, and George Box, who was one of the greats, would say he saw interesting statistics being done often not by the experts, but by the semi-amateurs, but who had an interesting problem they wanted to solve. And I think we are those amateurs, right? We have the interesting problems. And us taking the methods out there, not as like, just Deus ex machina just descending from out of heaven, but to understand them, see how can we take them, reapply them in a way which is really effective in our field. So I think OpenEye's mission, and this one we're heavily into, I can talk too much about it yet, but I think a lot of customers will see this in 2024 from us, is how do we take an OpenEye approach, but with AI power, right? And I think that's something that I'm personally very involved in and excited about. So I think that's how physics can help AI, right? And you haven't asked, but I'll ask you the way around.
Just about to.
But it's like, one of the issues, again, people coming naively into our field and thinking AI is going to solve the problems are faced with the fact that we don't have the billions and trillions of data points that you can use to train things on. And I think, again, there was a lot of this in the early days meaning like, February, like whatever, where you would just be like, well, I've got my corporate data, I'm just going to apply these methods on it. But even big companies, corporate data is, they typically have merged, it may be different data sets. No one quite remembers what the assay conditions were or whatever. So the data wasn't particularly clean. You don't have that much of it. But the ability to generate synthetic data through computation, we can generate endless amounts of data. It's just how much are you willing to pay? It gets back to like you should pay for computation. Because if used well, that will allow you to map out the domain, and from thenceforth, one can use AI because it will recognize situations assiduously and accurately. And so there is this almost priming the pump thing that I think we can do with physics better than anybody, right? Because we can map out the domains of interest. And we've done some of this, and it's very effective. We've done some things. We're looking at interactions as well and do custom force fields. Just do many, many evaluations and let AI work as has the field in things like, like the ANI force field. This is like a cottage industry now of making data sets. But I do think that's something that physics can provide is the substrata for AI to consume. So
not to, again, broken record thing, do you see us doing specific things with hardware?
Well, we are part of a company which basically designs the world's hardware. So it's always a possibility, right? I think hardware in general and appreciation for it will definitely improve. So, for example, we have semi-convinced Cadence, or we've convinced them, but it's partly us, partly other macroeconomic factors, to build our own GPU cloud, right? Because Amazon is so hit so hard by the demand for GPUs from first it was crypto, right, that MD was competing with. Now it's like AI. That we have occasions where we can't deliver what the dream of Orion was, which is computational demand. So as a way to make sure that we fill in the gaps and provide an alternate, we will be making our own cloud with Cadence's technology and IT help. But also we are looking to put Orion onto other platforms. So expect to see it on Google, right? Expect to see capabilities for doing on-prem use of facilities and including our own offering our own cloud as part of that. So I think from the technology side, you will see some very exciting things, which again is just really the direction we were in, right? But now I think it's kind of supercharged by the Cadence merger.
Another positive impact.
Yeah.
So what are you most excited about for the upcoming year?
I mentioned a few times, sprinkled in the word Carno, right? But that is, I think, my thing I'm most excited about. It grew out of a presentation / lecture that I gave at GSK 5 or 6 years ago that Eric Manis, who's been a good collaborator over the years, asked me to give. He said, well, you're always talking about statistics and design of experiments. Why don't you come talk about it? Which, as you know, the best way to learn something is to actually teach about it. And I admit I was a bit vague about what is design of experiments anyway, but it seemed like the technique used in other fields to do the minimum amount of experiments, make molecules, to get the result, make a drug. So I always thought that surely there's some way, that kind of technology and thought process would be useful. After we were merged, Anu Devran came to town and said, well, what should we be funding? And went down a long list and he picked out 2, one of which was design of experiments, strictly because it's a big part of what they do in chip design, right? They are very familiar with this and they're like, well, obviously it should be done in your field. And I'm like, yes, obviously, but no one really does it. But whoever being up for a challenge, I said, well, if you're willing to fund it, I'll build a group and we will see what we can do to make the process of optimization more efficient. So I'm happy to say that they provided funding for it. And Greg Barkan, who joined us from Pfizer, is leading that group in Boston. We've got a nice group of 5 or 6 people in that group. And we are very excited about what we're going to be able to offer. And what we're going to offer is not necessarily here's your design of experiments package, but it will at least initially be partnerships. So we will work with companies who are interested in applying these techniques because there are things that aren't very necessarily missable with the way things are done at present. So and this is again, timing-wise, couldn't be better because with COVID disappearing, more than the rear view mirror, getting back to being able to sit down with customers and say, let me tell you where we are and see if it's a match. And the surprising thing is how many customers are actually thinking along these directions. Like partly because of active learning from AI, which is a close cousin in many ways, Bayesian optimization. Everyone's thinking about how to do this, but we really have a dedicated funded team to work on it and to work with customers on actual projects. So I want to say very quickly, we have no interest in becoming a drug discovery company. When I first started talking with Cadence, they were like, we love you because you don't compete with customers. It's not what we're doing. But we do feel like we can help. That was always our primary goal. I feel like there's a very exciting year from my own particular focus on Carno. Did I mention Carno? And what everyone else in the company is working on, which is, again, a lot of what we've been doing for many years. It's the careful work, but also I think there's more exciting things about can we actually provide productivity through computation and calculation, and can we provide help with these new techniques to be able to recognize, to be able to draw from large data sources. So it's a great time to be in our industry.
How long did that go? Didn't we?
I haven't sworn once. I think I came close at one point, but I really haven't. It's unusual for me. It's deep faked.
We can have, the R-rated version, the director's cut. And
Santori time.
And don't forget the condescension.
Oh, and what he said. Of course. got a lot of problems with you people. For one thing, you wouldn't know a t-test from an elbow. The lack of appreciation for basic Bayes statistics. Like, look it up. It's like 250 years old.
If you don't want to be this person, come to Cut.